John, a diligent farmer, is dedicated to his. The family's land was uncomplicated and tranquil. One evening, tranquility enveloped life on the farm. Was interrupted by an injured hiker. Unexpectedly arrived at his door requesting. Moved by compassion, John extended a warm welcome. John welcomed the hiker into his home and provided him with sustenance, providing refuge for the night, but by daylight, his life took an unforeseen turn with law enforcement. On his property, an assembly of vehicles, attorneys, and journalists awaited his arrival. John was unaware that his small act of kindness was about to change his life continuously in manners he never anticipated. Welcome back to Unveiled, everyone. Today, I present another narrative. A poignant narrative to convey to you subsequently. After an arduous day of laboring in the fields, John Miller, a farmer in his early 50s, stands in his compact, poorly illuminated kitchen outside. The tempest roars with wind shrieking across the agricultural land and precipitation striking against the. John stirs a saucepan at the stove by the windows. Warm milk with a creamy surface rippling. Carefully positioned on the counter beside him is a hardened loaf of bread, its texture coarse, calloused hands cleave through it. Attentively the sound of the knife scraping against the cutting board, hardly perceptible amidst the tempest, he positions the slices into a chipped bowl, ladling the warm milk cascaded over them, observing as the bread became tender and started to crumble. This uncomplicated supper serves as his recompense for the day's toil, a serene rite that provides a degree of solace. He chooses to raise the spoon and is on the verge of taking his initial bite. Was interrupted by a startling bang at the door. Penetrates the storm. John pauses, his hand suspended above the basin. The knock resounds once again, louder and more insistent. Desperate reverberations permeating the antiquated space. Visitors to the farmhouse are few in this area. Particularly in such temperatures, his brow furrows as he seizes a flashlight suspended beside the door, abandoning his uneaten supper. He navigates the counter with caution toward the direction of the sound when the door creaked. Activate the beam of his flashlight, placing a soaked figure on the porch. A man in his early 30s with unkempt hair adhered to his forehead and a visage marked by exhaustion coursed through him as water flowed from his ravaged body. Clothing pooled at his feet. Please. The man stammered, seeking assistance with his voice, exhaustion perceptible above the howling wind. John's eyes expanded as he absorbed that the man's condition is characterized by pallid skin and instability. Motion and profound abrasions intersecting his arms. Without hesitation, John moved aside and signaled urgently. Enter swiftly, you will freeze. A man staggered inside, facing death outside. He left a path of water across the floor. He sat with his back to the hardwood floor. Breathing became difficult, and his ankle twisted. In an artificial way, John asserted, sit by the fire, directing him to a chair adjacent to the stone hearth, adding another log into the fire. He coaxed the embers to elevate the flames. Their warmth rapidly permeating the space. With a groan of relief, the man descended onto the chair, his trembling hands extending towards him. Thank you, he mumbled, his voice hoarse. John, with a hoarse voice, seized a tattered towel, retrieved it from a proximate hook and presented it. Dry yourself off, he said in a calm tone. Mild yet calm as the man applied a cloth to his face, and John's keen gaze did not overlook the scratches, the bruises, and the torn cloth adhering to his physique. What transpired to you? He inquired, his voice subdued. However, tinged with apprehension, the man recoiled. His actions were rigid as he performed the task. He had a towel slung over his arms while I was trekking. Began falteringly, his speech interrupted by profound pauses. Breaths traversed the path across the forest. I did not anticipate the storm would escalate to this extent. I tripped on some rocks and hurt my ankle, and he ceased speaking, fixated on the honestly. I did not anticipate that I would succeed. John crouched beside the cupboard. Extracting a container of homemade salve and a bandage roll, he fired the man an assuring gaze as he remained composed. Your presence is what is significant at this moment. You are secure. As John meticulously cleans the man recoiled from his wounds. Sting of the salve but refrained from speaking. His thankfulness was evident in his fatigued expression. Examined eyes, You are fortunate it is inconsequential." John commented that it was worse, his hands solid as ever. He bandaged the swollen ankle with exercise caution. "This should suffice for the present. However, minimize your engagement with it as much as possible." The man nodded, his voice gentle, "And I am genuinely uncertain how to express my gratitude. You were not obligated to assist me, yet you did." Did John shake his head dismissively? Little smile at the edge of his "What type of man would I be if I let us procure something warm for you?" John retreated into the kitchen and observed the bowl of bread and the milk he had made for himself. The dinner was uncomplicated, the type he frequently depended upon. Following protracted days of arduous labor, his stomach emitted a loud, piercing grumble. Reminder that he had not consumed food since a hastily consumed slice of bread and a cup of coffee prior to departing to attend. He paused momentarily at the farm. The burden of his hunger pulling at him, but the depiction of the drenched hiker quaking beside the fire filled his impulsive thoughts. He lifted the bowl. It was little, yet it sufficed to provide warmth and provide solace to an individual in need. While bearing it, John positioned the bowl in the living room. He placed the bowl gently on the table in front of the hiker, expressing his calm determination. "It may be minimal, but it will provide warmth." The man gazed at the bowl and then at John. "What about you? Will you not eat?" "I already have." John inadvertently revealed the lie. As natural as his grin, "This is essential." The man hesitated more than I did, but eventually retrieved the bowl. He took the first nibble slowly. Trembling hands, revealing inherent fragility, warmth gradually enveloped him. The meal commenced to restore vibrancy to his cheeks, flushed as the man consumed his meal in silence, and John sank into a chair adjacent to the ignited pile of aged, tattered documents. The man looked up between his legs, took bites and observed John gazing intently on one of the pages, his brow creased. With profound apprehension, the wavering flame illuminated bold writing near the apex of the document, "Observe a foreclosure." The remainder of the page was somewhat obscured by John's hand, yet the strain in his countenance conveyed volume. Subsequent to a brief hesitation, the man articulated. He nodded slightly, indicating that everything was okay. Toward the documents, his tone measured, desiring to overstep. JN glanced upward, taken by surprise, and subsequently exhaled a weary sigh. "Only farm day," he stated, his tone calibrated as though he did not wish to elaborate further on anything irrelevant to you. "Should be concerned for the man," who nodded, perceiving the gravity in John's voice, "but still I refrain from pressing more and hope for a favorable outcome." He truly extended his gaze. Dwelling on the farmer's fatigue, John succeeded in producing a subtle smile. Folding the papers and placing them on, he stroked the tiny table beside him. His temples, as if to alleviate the burden of the day, subsequently disrupted the silence. "My name is Andrew, the hiker," he responded, lowering his spoon. "And you, John?" the farmer responded succinctly while reclining his chair. Their discussion was trivial. However, John's expression was palpably burdened by the weight of the storm and the quiet strain. As Andrew completed his dinner, he observed the room. He glanced at the window, but the rain continued. The rain hit the glass, and the wind howled, warning me to take heed. "Depart soon after the storm subsides," Andrew stated reluctantly. "Do not contemplate it," John said assertively, "that you are unfit to travel any place tonight or remain here to acquire some. You may leave the remainder in the morning." Andrew gazed at him with uncertainty, inquiring if he was certain. "Do not wish to." John dismissed his worries. "Failing to provide a restorative night's sleep is the atom minimum. You need not be concerned about the repose." Unwillingly, Andrew acknowledged the warmth of the fire and the solace of John's hospitality, starting to alleviate his strained nerves. After cleaning the dishes, John seized a dense covering from an adjacent trunk and delivered it to Andrew. "You will occupy my bed this evening," he remarked with a tone that conveyed there is no space for debate. "I will sleep outside." Andrew objected. "I cannot permit you to do that. John has already accomplished a great deal. By silencing him with my hand, I assert that it is not permissible." Andrew, unable to resist the argument, accompanied John to a small bedroom. At the back of the house, a patchwork blanket, its hues bright, adorned the unassuming bed. The marked disparity with the dilapidated walls of the house suggested that John should step into the room to rest. Returning to the door, we will discuss further. In the morning, John made his way back to the living room, where the storm outside had started to lessen, although the farmhouse was still battered. The farmhouse stood firm against the wind and rain. Night within the flickering firelight project elongated shadows outside, which walls, providing a transient sensation of warmth and security provided to the two unfamiliar individuals united by the tempest in the guest chamber. Andrew lay awake, unable to sleep. Disturb the farmer's benevolence or the vision from his memory of those documents, the warm dinner, the clean bandages, and the bed exceeded his expectations significantly, particularly from an individual who is so evidently possessing minimal resources. He determined to seek a method to reciprocate the man's benevolence while he was unaware of how by dawn the storm had subsided, leaving a faint sound of pounding roused Andrew from his slumber. He squinted against the morning sunlight. Flowing through the small aperture of the guest room, his body still burdened by the fatigue from the preceding day, he observed John at the window. Mending a damaged wooden gate with meticulous precision of the golden morning illumination creates elongated shadows, emphasizing John's fatigued physique as Andrew concentrated on putting on his jacket. Out into the brisk air, caressing, he inhaled deeply against his face. Relishing the tranquil serenity of the farm as he approached John, he was unable to refrain. Nevertheless, he got a pang of remorse for all the comfort and shelter he had received. It was evident that John had minimal resources available. In the morning, Andrew yelled out with his voice, shattering the stillness. John halted mid-swing, lowering the hammer. He wiped his brow upon the ground. The back of his hand displayed a tiny smile. "Good morning. I hope you had a restful sleep." "I did, thank you." Andrew's voice was emotional, "and I was about to thank you." As he departed, he signaled towards the orientation of the primary thoroughfare with a sense of sorrow at the farewell. John nodded but elevated to maintain his tone, warm yet resolute. "Please hold on for a moment, I have something to convey." Curious, Andrew observed something as John vanished inside the barn. His gaze traveled alone toward the distance. He traveled many paces toward the periphery of the land. Near the boundary of the property, that is when his gaze fell upon a signboard partially concealed by rampant vegetation. The bold letters displayed the name of a renowned corporation, a name that possessed a reputation for consuming little agricultural plots situated below it, with reduced typography suggesting a foreboding warning that did not require complete reading. To the sign appeared ominously. Covert menace looming above the tranquil morning. Experiencing a pang of disquiet, Andrew redirected his attention to he observed a farm adjacent to the barn. He observed a sequence of barrels configured to gather rainwater from their interconnected spouts. Using remnants of metal and adhesive tape, the improvised system was indicative of the reasons behind it. A farm of this magnitude relies significantly on. He traced the rainfall along the gutters, his gaze observing their tattered, mended condition as he approached the fields. Another element captured his attention. The bottom of the irrigation ditch is fractured. It appeared desolate, as though it had not been maintained. Andrew crouched to observe water for the first time in years. Contact the adjacent earth, perceiving its rough texture. Brittle texture disintegrates under his. He straightened his fingers while glancing back toward the home, his thoughts racing. Elements align significantly. The corporation's imminent influence over a farmer depending on rains for arid fields once flourished. Indications of an individual contending with forces significantly superior. Their control caused Andrew's chest to constrict as he recognized the extent of John's influence. Withstanding the tranquility of the farm was disrupted by the gentle crunch of. He turned to observe footsteps on the dirt. John approaches while holding a burlap bag. John smiled as he handed it over. The bag for him, a small token, fresh veggies and some fruits. It is hardly substantial, yet it originates from the farm. At the very least, I can do this. Andrew received the bag. His voice, imbued with thanks, was gentle. They have already gone above and beyond to allow me to stay here, providing me with a warm lunch and assistance. I am uncertain how to manage my injuries. Repay you, John shrugged. There is no reason for concern. Concerning repayment, simply return home. Andrew paused in his grip on safety. Constriction of the sack. Before I depart, may I inquire about something, John? tilted his head, curiosity igniting within. Andrew gestured, indicating his eyes. Upon approaching the rain barrels, I observed your presence. Is collecting rainwater solely for a shadow obscured John's face. He let out a sigh, realizing that it wasn't just a backup. Evergreen Corporation acquired the water. As part of their entitlements to this region, Evergreen Corporation established a framework to redirect water from the river, which was insufficient for the surrounding farmers. Naturally, they extended their services to me, but at an expense that would further entrap me. Financial obligations compel me to rely on rainfall. What few remnants I can recover, Andrew acquiesced. Gradually, his thoughts accelerated with the terrain. Is it yours? John's jaw clenched, and he gazed onto the fields. The term is currently difficult to comprehend. However, they have pursued it for years. Evergreen intends to purchase it, and when I did, they rejected it despite their utmost efforts. Propel me into elevated conflicts over zoning legislation, made erroneous assertions regarding attempted environmental infractions, persuade my neighbors to isolate me. Halted, his tone resolute yet imbued with the fatigue of this place has been within me. I will not relinquish it to my family for generations to come. Andrew accepted everything that came his way. His words, directed once more towards the faraway signboards, elude my imagination. That is akin to persevering through all of that. JN exhibited a little smile, lightening his demeanor. This location encompasses more than merely the farm is my residence and my heritage. Relinquishing it is not an option. Is not an Andrew paused momentarily. Before you talk again, review those documents. Were the discussions last night concerning the farm? John's eyebrows raised slightly in astonishment at the inquiry on certain legal notifications. Debt claims are not a concern you should prioritize. Acquaint yourself with Andrew, as I am aware that we have only recently met. I started cautiously, but if it's okay with you, could I take a closer look? I have experience with an equitable distribution of contracts and legal matters. Perhaps I can assist John throughout my time. A combination of gratitude and suspicion towards him. That is a generous offer. However, I would prefer not to impose upon you, as Andrew stated that my troubles are not a burden. Resolutely, if there exists even a slight possibility that I, John, observed him with the intention of assistance. He paused momentarily before nodding gently in agreement. I will resolutely follow John into the house. Andrew stood near the barn with his, I will resolutely follow John into the house. Whether he could genuinely assist, yet the concept abandons John to confront this conflict unaided. The sight of John returning with a small collection of documents did not sit well with him. Andrew received them cautiously. Resolve radiating in his gaze, he expressed gratitude for the faith placed in him. I will assess what I can accomplish. With a final wave, Andrew vanished beneath the carry, the sack of fresh produce in his comprehension and a conclusion developing in his thoughts. John remained in position for a brief while. Gazing at the vacant road, he exhaled. Vigorously shaking his head as if to dispel the persistent uncertainties. Without an alternative, he returned to the barn, selecting and retrieving the hammer he had previously placed down. The sound of nails being driven into wood. John's thoughts resonated throughout the property. He became distracted while attempting to concentrate on his work. However, Andrew's farewell remarks persisted in. Could a stranger genuinely assist his mind? Could he even afford to hope for a resolution? Resolving his thoughts, John clenched his jaw and struck with increased intensity, as though the action may obliterate the uncertainty tormenting him. Currently, there is work to be accomplished. Was the sole action he could undertake. Manage the hours that elapsed unnoticed. The sun ascends higher in the sky. John transitioned from one activity to another, attending to the obstinate repairs the storm had abandoned. He wiped the perspiration from his forehead and murmured to himself about the fractured boards and loose hinges. It wasn't until he was securing a loose board that he noticed the approaching storm. The barn door, indicating the sound of approaching engines, interrupted his thoughts. Remained motionless, clutching the hammer firmly as a dark automobile turned onto the gravel road. Initially appeared its glossy surface refracting the afternoon sunshine from behind. Two police cruisers arrived with their lights activated. Distinct yet subtle, a van displaying a news station emblem followed closely. What in the world, did John mutter? As he set down his hammer, a cold coursed through him. As the convoy entered his driveway, generating a cloud of dust, his heart raced as he dried his hands. Donning his pants, he advanced. Reluctantly, Andrew was the initial one to advance. Exiting the news wagon, now attired in tailored clothing that rendered him nearly unidentifiable in his calm yet serious demeanor, suggested a feeling of purpose from the polished black vehicle trailing him. Two lawyers appeared, each bearing a polished briefcase, their expressions concentrated and professional. Seconds subsequently, the cops' officers disembarked from their cruisers, conducting a scan. The region with subdued authority presence imparting an indelible aura of the gravity of the scene. John's respiration, he clenched his hands in response to his anxiety. Ascended his spine. What transpires here? He yelled out, his voice strained. Why are you? The police are present here. Reporters approached Andrew with calculated movements, elevating his arms in a gesture of reassurance. John, I am aware of this. It appears substantial, but I require your trust. I owe you. And John's gaze shifted rapidly between the police and the reporters, exacerbating the mess. He requested a more rapid and comprehensive explanation. With a stern voice, Andrew halted momentarily. His tone was steady yet firm. Just feet away. I have been an investigative journalist, seeking to unveil corporate malfeasance focusing on small agricultural producers. John's jaw clenched with pride and exhaustion as he struggled to understand why I had not asked for his help. He stated in a subdued tone, I am aware that you did not. Andrew said, his tone becoming gentler. However, this struggle extends beyond your individual experience. You cannot achieve victory independently. The lawyers to whom he gestured, the gang behind him, is present to review your materials. The journalists, they are present to ensure the accuracy of your narrative. Exits and the police have arrived. Ensure that the corporation refrains from retaliation or attempts to intervene. John's gaze shifted to the lawyers, who stood prepared, with professional expressions, whereas the reporters repositioned microphones and cameras, conversing amongst themselves. Police officers maintained vigilance. Existence disconcerting. Why should I trust any of this? Is John? John inquired after a brief pause. Andrew walked forward, his voice tinged with uncertainty. His eyes met John's closely. Because I have dedicated years to uncovering narratives such as yours, and the sole reason I am standing here presently indicates that you provided me refuge when it was not obligatory. You will permit the attorneys to review the documents, will reveal the truth. John hesitated, his instincts divided. Suspicion and a glimmer of hope. Ultimately, he subsequently directed his attention toward the mansion. He returned grasping a bundle of documents. His hands quivered a little as he extended them to one of the attorneys, who perused the documents with precision. The subsequent minutes felt precise. For hours, John remained by the tents the lawyer finally coiled in his chest. Observed his demeanor as grim yet determined. Mr. Miller, the attorney, commenced his maintain a forceful and professional tone. Evaluated your contracts according to our criteria. Identified the corporation with whom you are engaged has been participating in fraudulent activities and techniques they have employed to create fraudulent fees and manipulate debts to focus on your. John couldn't hold his breath. Asserting that they had been deceitful throughout, the lawyer affirmed their acknowledgement. They were taking advantage of legal loopholes to force small farmers like you to give up your land. However, we now have this proof in our possession. We can proceed to file an injunction. Cease their actions forthwith. Reporters commenced inquiring of John. Their cameras documented every moment. What is the duration of your engagement with this matter? One of them inquired, and JN hesitated, his voice faltering. He had been trembling slightly for months. He said they had been sending notifications about rising costs, which threatened my possessions, but I wasn't sure what to do. I believed I would have to relinquish Andrew. Laid a comforting hand on John's. You are no longer alone in this. The narrative is becoming public, and they will not be able to conceal their deeds any longer. As the police officers proceeded to secure the region, guaranteeing that no corporate representatives, the lawyers elucidate the potential for interference. The subsequent action will involve initiating a lawsuit in opposition to the corporation for its unlawful activities. You will additionally be reimbursed for the damages you have incurred. one of them remarked on the day suffered. Commenced with a surge of activity. Attorneys expedited the submission of the essential materials for the reporters, conducted a conversation with John and recorded the condition of his farm, and the cops guaranteed the preservation of John's property. Secured by the evening news that the corporation's unscrupulous practices had begun to proliferate, inciting indignation and demand for responsibility in the forthcoming weeks that ensued once the legal dispute was resolved. The corporation was in John's favor, instructed to annul all obligations and restitute any confiscated assets. Furthermore, they were severely penalized for their fraudulent activities, and a component of the settlement were granted to John as remuneration. With newfound stability, John was able to spend in the restoration of his farm equipment and increase his businesses on his land, once on the verge of being lost, becoming a flourishing emblem of perseverance over months gone. The farmhouse, formerly an emblem of isolation, had transformed into a congregation site. For the community, the formerly desolate fields now thrived, yielding a plethora of farmers united by fresh produce. Their collective adversity had forged a prosperous cooperative, guaranteeing the enduring sustainability of their lives. One evening, when John stood on his porch observing the sunset, he reflected on the past beyond the horizon. Tempestuous night that transformed his existence. He recalled the anxiety and the solitude, and the unforeseen appearance of an outsider. He recalled the benevolence he had exhibited. Not anticipating it to possess such a profound a surge of appreciation enveloped. He recognized that by assisting Andrew, he had not only preserved his own farm, but it also ignited a movement that would help the entire community. He posited that even in the most profound darkness, storms may always yield hope. That the smallest gestures of benevolence could own the most significant and enduring. Thank you for watching. I hope this has had an impact on you. If the story resonated with you, please remember to like it, subscribe and disseminate to propagate the inspiration, and before your departure, examine the videos playing on your screen are plentiful, featuring additional heartwarming narratives that we click now and ensure your enjoyment. Benevolence emanating.